Right, welcome. We're live. Welcome to From the Shed End with myself, T.Dot, as always. Thank you very much for joining me. Now, before we get into the content, please subscribe to the channel. Make sure you can tell all your friends, or your Chelsea friends, your Chelsea teammates about this. Everyone, to tell everyone about this video. We're trying to get the views up, we're trying to get the streams up, the numbers up. Make sure you hit that Linktree link in the description as well. That will take you to all our social accounts, all our podcast episodes as well. And yeah, make sure you give it a thumbs up before you leave this video. Now, there's a lot to talk about. Obviously, we've got a big game tonight. This isn't just a must-win game for Graham Potter. This is a must-win game for Chelsea. This is a must-win game for everyone. Do you know what I mean? But I feel like there's a lot more that we can talk about as well. There's been a lot that's happening on and off the field at Chelsea. There's still things on and off the field that's happening at Chelsea as well. But I think the main key things we'll talk about is the game, the Dortmund game, later on in the stream. But I do want to talk about a few things, because last night I watched the highlights. I was at the under-21s game, Manchester United versus Chelsea. It was 3-1 to Chelsea in the end. Brilliant performance from us against Manchester, closing that gap at the top of Premier League 2. Brilliant result. But I did come home and I watched Brentford. And one of the things that I want to talk about, and one of the things that I look at this player and I think this is what we're missing at Chelsea, is Ivan Toney. We're missing a striker anyway, we know that, but we're missing an Ivan Toney. Someone else I'm going to talk about shortly as well. But Ivan Toney, man, is this a player that Chelsea should gamble on? Yes, I know that he's going through a lot of things off field in terms of the gambling sanctions. That it look like that he's going to receive a hefty ban from football next season by the looks of it now. But is this someone that we should put a lot of trust into, even with the ban? Even with the fact that we know we can't use him, for the rest of probably the early part of next season. But for beyond that, let's talk about beyond next season. Let's talk about the next 3 or 4 years. Someone who's young, who knows the Premier League. I think he scored 10 in 10 penalties now as well. I think he's one away from matching Yaya Touré's record with 100% penalties taken. He's just an all-round number 9 striker. Ivan Toney fits the profile of everything we need. Me personally, I would go for him. I would go for Ivan Toney. I think he's a brilliant striker. I'm just looking at his stats here now. His stats are brilliant, and I think if we can get someone like Ivan Toney into the team, I know he comes with a lot of baggage. I know that he's going to get a massive ban. But if the ban was only for 3 months, 4 months, I mean, we're talking, December, he can play for us. It'd be like a signing in January. Brentford potentially might let him go for the right price. But for someone who is proven in the Premier League, knows where the back of the net is, makes brilliant runs, links up with the attacking midfielders. I mean, imagine him with Madueke, with João Felix, with Mudryk, Sterling. The players that he needs around him, Enzo Fernandez. It seems like for me personally, this is someone that slightly has gone under the radar in terms of, top clubs maybe touching him because of what's happening with him at the moment with the FA investigation. But Ivan Toney fits the profile for me. He really does. He's someone that I think if we can get hold of Ivan Toney and put him into that team and he can do well for us, we're onto a winner, in my opinion. Now, there's been a lot of talk about Tammy Abraham, who has got a buyback clause in his contract, currently at Roma, having a difficult season, I'd say, at Roma. Hasn't really hit the heights that he did at the first season when he went there. I'm not really keen on Tammy Abraham coming back for 70 million, which is what I think the buyback clause is in the contract. Obviously, that works for Roma. You look at the money that's involved to bring him back to the club. It does stink of another Romelu Lukaku, I'm going to be honest. You look at the amount of money we spent for Lukaku, the 97.5 million. And then you look at what it would take to bring back Tammy Abraham, who, let's be honest, wasn't the answer when we had him in the team. Yes, he done really well under Frank Lampard, and he kind of was outshadowed and ousted out the team when he was under Thomas Tuchel. But for me, he's not the all in end. He's not the striker that I think we would need in the team. I really don't. I feel like he's at best, he's a mid-table Premier League team. I know we're mid-table, but I mean, in terms of going forward, and he's not one of those players that I could see leading us to a Champions League, leading us to the Premier League. I don't see him as that. Ivan Toney, I think, needs a step up. I think he needs that another level to his game. He needs to add that to it now, and I think at Brentford he's done a lot of that. You know, he's someone that you know when he's got the ball, he's gonna try and score. You know, we've been missing that for so long. You look at Kai Havertz, who, again, you know, I read a stat. He's the player that's been played out of position the most. Basically, he's played so many different positions at Chelsea, and we still don't know what Kai Havertz's natural or best position is at Chelsea at the moment, and that's worrying. You know, he's not a number 9. We know that 100%. But I do think if we can bring in a striker in the summer, maybe another midfielder, I think we've got the squad. I really do. You know, I think we've got a squad there on our hands. Whether that's Graham Potter that leads us into the next season or the season after that is another question. But I think in terms of a striker, even going back to the Leeds game at the weekend, you know, we were lucky to get that win, you know, lucky to score. And we keep relying on, you know, for so many years, we've relied on Reece James to score, chipping with the goals. Jorginho at one point was our top goal scorer with the penalties that he was taking. You know, Ben Chilwell at one point was chipping in with goals as well. So we're kind of heavily reliant on other people to get the goals, and not our striker, which is, for me, is worrying. I mean, we should be looking at, you know, a striker is the main focal point of the team getting the goals. You know, we should be looking at a striker that can maybe hit 15 to 20 goals a season. You know, I'm looking at Ivan Toney as that person. I really do think he's got that in him. Tammy Abraham, I don't. I'd be really worried if he went out and spent, you know, 70 million plus on a player that hasn't really proven it at Chelsea, hasn't really done it when he went to Derby, hasn't really proven himself when he went to Roma. You know, he's really a mid-table player. He really is for me, Tammy Abraham, and I wouldn't want to spend 70 million on him. I don't think he's worth that. But, you know, I think another player, and I was surprised. I mean, I sort of looked at this maybe Christmas and realised that his contract was coming to an end, but Karim Benzema will be a free agent, a free player at the end of this season. It doesn't look like he's going to renew his contract at Real Madrid. Yes, he's 35 years of age. So it's another Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. It is another Aubameyang. But it's a goal scorer. It's a goal scorer. I watched him. Okay, he didn't score against Real Betis at the weekend, but just looking at some of the performances, even against Liverpool in the Champions League, you know, some of these performances that a 35-year-old Karim Benzema is putting in, he would fit into the team for a season. Now, the only downside is he doesn't fit the profile currently of what Todd Bowley and obviously Graham Potter and his coaching staff are trying to build at Chelsea. You know, he isn't that age range of, you know, the 20 to 25-year-old player. But he's prolific. You know, he's world class. Let's be honest. He's a world class striker. And for one season, if it means one season, we have to wait and bring in a Karim Benzema. If we can't get an Ivan Toney, you know, if we don't get a Harry Kane, who again is a player that is being talked about to go to United, and we need, for me personally, we need someone who's proven as a goal scorer, or we need someone who's proven in the Premier League that can cope with the Premier League and knows what the Premier League's about, and that's Ivan Toney or Karim Benzema. I think bringing back Tammy Abraham would just be, for me, it would be a nonsense. You know, I really don't understand why we would do that. You know, for me, Benzema, World Cup winning Benzema, or you've got, you know, 10 out of 10 penalties, Ivan Toney, 100% record as a penalty taker, and someone that just knows where the back of the net is. I can see it now, him playing with Sterling, playing with Madueke, playing with Mudryk, with Felix, all these players, I can see him linking up with the play, making that run off the final defender and slotting the ball into the back of it. I can see it right now. And I feel like Ivan Toney needs that step up. He needs it. But if we can't get him and Karim Benzema is there in the summer, I wouldn't rule that out. I mean, there's other players out there. There's Lionel Messi that will be looking like he might be leaving PSG in the summer. But, I mean, you're talking about the wage structure. You're talking about FFP. You're talking about a lot of things there. I just don't see him coming. I just don't see him coming. You know, I think if we were going to get one or two out of Ronaldo and Messi, it would have been Ronaldo. I just don't see Messi coming to the Premier League at this age now. I think maybe, you know, Qatar, maybe an option for him, maybe America, but I just don't see him coming to the Premier League at the age that he is now. Still a world-class player, but I just don't see Messi coming to the Premier League. But Karim Benzema, I could see playing a season in the Premier League, whether that's at Chelsea or a team lower than us, or with lower expectations next season than us. But I can see him coming to the Premier League because I still think he's got a point to prove. You know, I know he's 35, but again, he's a player that doesn't really, from what I know, get himself injured, or he's not really out for that many games. So he's still got a lot of time. He's still got a lot of time to prove himself. And for me, you know, Karim Benzema is world class. So, you know, he has to be on that short list of strikers for me. But the one I'm looking at and I'm thinking, why isn't the club going in for Ivan Toney? Why aren't they taking a gamble on him? Because yes, he's going to get a ban, even if he's banned for a season. I know it's a massive call, and you're still going to be needing a striker for next season. But in the future, I mean, if it means that he can maybe play, you know, reserve games, or he can play, you know, for the Premier League 2 team, I don't know how it would work in terms of his ban. But if he's banned from just competitive Premier League football, then he still can play for the development squad for a season. We can still maybe send him out on loan if it's just an English ban. I don't know. It depends on the rulings of the bans and whatever. But if there's loopholes, and we are the loophole FC, we find loopholes in everything. If there's a way that we can keep Ivan Toney fit for a season or half a season, if he's banned for 6 months or whatever, and bring him in for half the season, it's a no-brainer to me. We should be going for Ivan Toney 100%. He's someone that for me is a proven goal scorer. So the fact that we're not even considering him is a bit weird to me. But let's move on. Let's talk about someone else. Now, we did mention, obviously, other players in the team, and I talked about attacking midfielders. And one player I didn't mention was Mason Mount, who currently looks like all deals have been put to the side for now until some kind of discussions can recommence in the summer. I did read something really good on the Athletic this morning that was a good piece, and I can't remember who it was written by, but it basically said that Mason Mount is not against signing a new deal. He wants to stay at the club. His ultimate aim is to stay at the club. He doesn't want to move. But there is question marks around the contract that is being offered to Mason Mount. Now, he's obviously looking for a shorter deal. He doesn't want to sign a similar deal to Mudryk or to Reece James. Even N'Golo Kante, you know, you look at N'Golo Kante, who looks like he signed a deal for 4 years, with 3 with the option to extend. But Mason Mount doesn't want to be tied down to an 8-year deal. I think that would take him up to maybe 30 or 31. So it's a long deal for him. I think he's been offered in the sort of region of what Reece James was offered in terms of wage structure. But I think it's more the incentives as well. You know, I mean, a lot of these contracts now come down to if you qualify for the Champions League, if you're in the Champions League and you get to the semi-finals, the finals, if you win the Champions League, there's a lot of incentives in there. And I think one of the things that Todd Bowley and the hierarchy underneath him is trying to do is to bring incentive contracts back into football. You know, he wants to bring contracts in that basically means if you play and you perform well, you're going to get rewarded. Whereas previously, not just at Chelsea, but for other clubs as well, you know, there's been a lot of talk and I know a lot of contracts. I know individuals as well who've played at top level. You know, they've had contracts where the bonuses are just there. They don't have to do anything. They don't have to achieve anything. They don't have to win the FA Cup. They don't have to get to the latter stages of the Champions League. The bonuses are just there. You know, sometimes you might get a win bonus. Sometimes you just get bonuses because you've made so many appearances for the club. So I think Todd Bowley's trying to come away from that and bring in and reintroduce incentive contracts, bonuses, where you have to actually perform well, to get your bonuses. And that's just, for me, that's the right call. Now, if Mason Mount wants to leave the club, I don't think anyone is against that. We all know that Mason Mount has gone through a rough time or a rough patch at the club at the moment. He doesn't seem to be enjoying his football. There's a lot of talk about him being linked with Liverpool. Manchester United is another club that he's being linked with as well. And I think if it is a case that he wants to go, or he's not happy, or he wants to be out of the club, he doesn't want to be in the club, then I think he has to go. And I think the owners are willing to allow him to leave at the end of the season and try and get some money for him. They don't want him to go into that final year of his deal still up in airs and no one really knows what's happening. They don't know if he's going to stay and also as well, that impacts the squad. You know, we've seen it with clubs and players in the past where, you know, they've gone into a new season and there's uncertainty about a particular player, and you know it's dragged on and it's dragged on, and it can also impact the squad as well. So you don't want to be going into a season where, you know, a fresh season with these kind of issues. And I think if it comes down to it, I think the club will sell Mason Mount. Now, there has to be some sort of meet in the middle situation here if Mason Mount is to stay. I think, you know, from what I've read, you know, the 300,000 that he's apparently after is incorrect. He doesn't want that, but he definitely doesn't want to sign a contract for 8 years. And in a way, I kind of agree with him. You know, I think it's a long deal. It does tie you down to the club, but if he loves the club as much as he says he does, and he's, you know, Cobham, as everyone keeps calling, his proper Chelsea, as everyone tells me that he is, then it shouldn't be a problem for him to sign an 8-year deal for the club that he's grew up in, the club that he's come through the ranks at. And if he wants to make himself a legend, which is what, you know, you look at even Frank Lampard, who wasn't signed from the youth academy, he came from West Ham. You know, he made himself a legend at the club. John Terry made himself a legend at the club. You know, these players that came through the ranks have gone on and done better things as well. So I think if he wants to be that caliber, that level, then for me personally, it'd be a no-brainer to sign a deal. Regardless of the 8 years. I mean, the 8 years is just the 8 years. You know, hopefully his agent, he's got lawyers involved that will put certain clauses in for, you know, if he wants to leave after 5 years, then there's nothing to stop him from doing that. He can still be sold. I think, you know, he can still protect himself and cover himself within that 8-year deal to allow him to move on if he wants a new challenge after 5 years at Chelsea in a new contract that he signed. So I don't think it should be the be all and end all that he can't sign a deal because it's for, you know, 7.5 years or 8 years. But I do think that's what Todd Boehly's doing now. I think Todd Boehly doesn't want to put players on 3-year deals. He wants people to be at this club for the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years. He wants to build something. And if you're not part of that, or you don't want to be a part of that, I think Todd Boehly's basically saying the door's over there. Just let us know and we'll sort the deal out for you to go. You know, we've seen it with Ross Barkley. We've seen it with Jorginho, how quick that deal was done with Arsenal. So I don't think it's a case of any player can hold the club at ransom anymore, which has happened over the years with many players at different clubs where they've been able to hold the club at ransom and been able to demand a particular fee or demand a particular wage structure. I don't think that's the case here. I think this is a case where Mason Mount either has to sit back, accept the deal, accept the incentives that come with that deal, and get his head down and get himself back into the game. You know, I mentioned on the last podcast episode that, you know, you look at Marcus Rashford, you know, a player that was down and out. You know, the United fans had turned on him. The manager looked like he'd given up on him. You know, he looked like he didn't want to be at the club. And he turned things around. He's one of the best players currently based on form in Europe, and he's doing really well for United. And I think Mason Mount fits into that same category. You know, I think if he gets his head down and he performs and he plays well, there's no reason why he can't force his way back into that squad. And it's a massive congested area where he wants to play, you know, in terms of squad selection, the amount of players that are going to be fighting for those places. You know, João Felix, if he stays on a permanent, you know, you've got Hakim Ziyech, you've got Conor Gallagher, you've got Raheem Sterling, you've got so many players, Christian Pulisic, Madueke, Mudryk, all these players that can play in intricate roles around and amongst that number 9 striker role as well. You know, he's going to be fighting for a place regardless. And if he's not up for the fight, then he does have to move on. And I think there will be players that move on. Or another one, Ruben Loftus-Cheek, who's going into his final year of his deal. Again, there's no talk of a new deal for Loftus-Cheek. And I do think it's sad for Ruben, because I think he's never really been given a real solid crack at the whip in terms of playing, you know, consistent football for Chelsea. But I also think he's had 2 massive injuries when you think back to the seasons where he was out for a long period of the time of the season. And I think that's possibly like derailed all sorts of plans for him trying to cement himself into the squad. Obviously players have come through and overtaken him in terms of that, and players have been brought. You know, look at Fernandes, you look at, you know, the fact that Kante's still out, but we're still crying for Kante. You know, Kovacic is in there now. You know, Dennis Zakaria, who's come in on loan, has done a good job there when he's been playing. So there's a lot of players that have come before him, and he's still not getting a run out. And you know, when we're seeing Ruben Loftus-Cheek now, potentially sometimes it's a right wing back position, it's out of position to try and fit him into a squad. And I think, you know, Todd Boehly in the summer is going to want to try and balance the books out a little bit. So we know that Hakim Ziyech wants out. we know that, we've seen it. You know, he was almost ready to. He was there at Paris. You know, PSG. He wanted the move. So, you know, I think he'll be one that goes. I think Ruben Loftus-Cheek. You know, we're coming into that critical part of the season where if deals aren't being done, then I would say potentially that, you know, it looks like he isn't going to be getting a new deal. And it's a shame for him, but I look at, you know, the likes of Lewis Baker, who have gone on and sort of found their level. And I think Ruben Loftus-Cheek has to do that now. I don't think he can play at this top level, you know, for a top club. I don't think he's that good of a player. I think he's a good player in terms of what he can bring to a team. But when you look at certain players that we need to go on and to try and win a Premier League or to try and win the Champions League, I don't see Ruben Loftus-Cheek fitting into that squad. I really don't. You know, and I think he's another player very similar to Tammy Abraham that can maybe go and find a mid-table Premier League team, or even go to the Championship and cement yourself there and find yourself down there. I mean, the Championship is it's not a shit league. It's a really good league to go and find your football and to maybe go and come and get promoted with a team and then bring yourself into the Premier League that way and reintroduce yourself. Because I feel like Ruben Loftus-Cheek has had so many chances to try and get into the squad, and some days, you know, sometimes you watch him, he looks really good. He looks like a really comfortable midfielder, and then sometimes he's just a bit out of sorts. He doesn't really know what's going on, and maybe that's just instructions from the manager. Maybe that's just because he's playing out of position as a right wing back. But I just think he's had so much time, and he's not, you know, we look at Ruben Loftus-Cheek, we look at even maybe Mason Mount. They're not the youngsters of the team anymore. Ruben Loftus-Cheek can't be classed as a youngster. He really can't anymore. He should be at that level where he is playing week in, week out for a team, and he is good enough to do that. I just don't think he's good enough to do it at Chelsea. You know, it's unfortunate for him, but I do think he's one of those ones. If there's no talk of a new deal for Ruben, then it looks likely that he's going to leave in the summer as well. You know, even Conor Gallagher. I mean, you've got to think, you know, Graham Potter said a few weeks ago that he's got too big of a squad and he does potentially need trimming down. You think about so many players that will, when we've got a fully fit squad, when N'Golo Kante's hopefully fully fit again. You look at Enzo Fernandez, I still think we might bring in, you know, a Lavia or Caicedo, another midfielder. I think we might bring someone else in that drops Ruben Loftus-Cheek further down that pecking order. So I think he's got to go. I think for his own football career and for himself, I think he should move on. Like I said, you know, the Championship is no bullshit of a league. It's a really good league. And I feel that's potentially where he should be. And if you look at some of the teams that might get relegated this season, you know, you're looking at Everton, you're looking at maybe West Ham, Southampton, Notts Forest. For me, those are the team that Ruben Loftus-Cheek would shine in, because he done really well at Palace. I thought he done really well at Fulham as well. Two teams that, you know, relatively there or thereabouts, normally mid-table or just hovering above relegation, but he done really well. And I think, you know, that's, for me personally, that's his level. I don't see Ruben Loftus-Cheek pushing us for a Champions League or carrying us over the line to try and get the Premier League. I don't see him doing that. So it's a shame for him, but I do think it's time for him to move on and to go as well. I did mention N'Golo Kante, another player who I think, for me personally, I think N'Golo Kante is a worry, because even yesterday in the press conference, you know, Graham Potter was asked, you know, is he fit enough to play? Is he fit enough to start? And he isn't still, and that's to be expected. He hasn't played football for 6 months. It's been a long time since we've seen back-to-back N'Golo Kante performances. So I get that. You know, I think he's got a lot of rehabilitation still to do. I think when he got injured, I'm pretty sure I said we probably won't see him this season anyway. I'm surprised that he's even been spoken about to be featuring in games so early into his injury rehabilitation. So to see him back in training and to be spoken about, is he starting, that's a good sign. But I really think we can't rush him. I really think he needs to be. And I think Graham Potter sort of mentioned this yesterday, that in the press conference, that, you know, Kante won't be playing 90 minutes. He's far away from a 90-minute game. I think we might see cameos of him, you know, in the odd game. He's obviously not in contention to start or even to be featured in tonight's game. But I do think, you know, over the next couple of weeks, we might see him just come off the bench and just get a few minutes under his belt, and to see him trying to build up that fitness, which is, you know, if anyone's ever had an injury where it's taking you out for 3 or 4 months, you know, just in terms of fitness, and, you know, you can do all the work in the gym as much as you want, and you can train as much as you want, but when you're in a competitive game, it's totally different. The intensity, playing a competitive game rather than just training with your teammates it's so different to just training or just being in the gym. So I think it's going to take a long time for Kante. My only worry with Kante is if he gets another big injury, and the age that he is as well, I think it could be good night for him. I really do. That's my only worry with Kante, is that he's at that stage, I think, in his career where if he picks up another big injury and it sets him, out for 4, maybe 5 months, I think we might not see Kante. Very similar to Reece James. I've spoken about Reece James on here a lot. Those kind of players that we kind of need us to carry us through the Premier League, we need them to carry us through the Champions League. Those sort of players, if they're constantly injured, I think that's the worry for me, is that if they're constantly injured, we just don't have anyone really to replace them. And I think that's why we need to bring in a Lavia or maybe Caicedo, someone of that caliber, to be able to fill in for Kante. Because if we do lose Kante again for 4, 5, 6 months of next season, I honestly don't think we'll see him again. And I think that's where the question marks came from when a lot of people, especially online, read that he was given a 3-year deal, which is what I think Kante was holding out for anyway. I don't think he wanted a year or 2. He wanted the 3 years as a bit more maybe as a safety net for him. But I think, he's got to try and get fit and stay fit. And if we can keep him fit with Enzo Fernandez, with another midfielder, keep Kovacic as well. Obviously, there's talk about Zakaria maybe staying longer than the loan period. But I think if we can keep those three in terms of Enzo, Kante and Kovacic fully fit for next season, then I don't see how we can go wrong, because we've got everything in that team now, bar the striker. We still need a striker. We might need another goalkeeper, but everywhere else is covered. You look at right back, we've got Malo Gusto, we've got Chilwell, we've got Cucurella, hopefully, who finds a bit of form. We've got all our centre backs covered. We've got the midfield covered. We've got those attacking midfielders, the wingers sorted. We just need a striker. We might need a goalkeeper. But N'Golo Kante is so key next season. He's so key. If we can't keep N'Golo Kante fit next season, then there's a massive worry for me, because I think he's the one that will allow Enzo to get forward a bit more and allow him to play a bit more further up the field like he did for Benfica. And I think we can't do that really as much as we want to with Enzo Fernandez until we've got N'Golo Kante back in that holding midfield role, doing the job that he likes to do, cleaning up the mess behind everyone else. He likes to do that. So I think we need him back in the team, but we can't rush him. We can't rush N'Golo Kante. He has to be someone for me that we ease back into the team. Maybe we give him a couple of minutes here or there, but I think the pre-season's key for N'Golo Kante. The pre-season's key for a lot of players. Reece James, Ben Chilwell, even Christian Pulisic, if he ends up staying at the club. Those players have to give us 100% next season, and they can't afford to be injured for at least 60% of the season, which is what Kante is currently doing at the moment. We can't afford to carry passengers next season, and that's my only worry about that big contract he's been given. Is he going to be able to stay fit for 3 years? I don't think he will, but let's hope he does. Let's hope we can get Kante back up and running. Obviously, Graham Potter, we're going to talk about the Dortmund game now, but obviously Graham Potter said that it's too early for N'Golo Kante to come back into the squad. But yeah, we need to wrap him in cotton wool. Wrap him in cotton wool for next season. Wrap him in cotton wool for the preseason, and let's go again. And speaking of that, let's talk about the game tonight. Obviously, it's a massive game. This is a massive game, not just for this season, actually. This is a massive game potentially for next season. The reason I say that is because if we can go on and win, get into the last 8, and I'm very confident we will get a win tonight. I really do. I think it's going to be difficult for us to not concede a goal, because that seems like our MO at the moment. It seems to be letting goals in and really not really taking our chances. That seems to be the pattern that we're currently going through at the moment. But I do think at Stamford Bridge, I'm thinking back to even when we went beat AC Milan under Graham Potter at the San Siro. I'm thinking back to when we beat Juventus. We beat them, And it was a really good Juventus team as well at Stamford Bridge. You know, we can do it. When we turn up and we want to turn on, we can do it. And I really think tonight we can do that. Massively, we have to be focused in midfield. Because if you remember back to that first leg, and I said it in the match preview yesterday, we have to be focused. We have to be switched on. We can't afford to allow Dortmund any time on that ball. We gave them so much time on the ball with Emre Can, Ozcan, with Jude Bellingham in that midfield, and you know, Can sort of sitting a bit deeper, but we allowed so much time on that ball. And the worst thing was Graham Potter didn't switch anything. He didn't bring on an extra midfielder to cope with that in midfield. He didn't do any of that. And I think tonight, personally for me, which I'm going to show you my lineup shortly, but for me personally, I wouldn't play a back three. I would not play a back three against this Dortmund team. This is a Dortmund team that I think has gone on a 10, maybe 11 unbeaten run. You know, like I said in the preview, they were losing in their game at the weekend. They dug deep. They got the result. They got the win in the end. And yes, Adeyemi and Kobel is out, their goalkeeper. Two massive absentees for them, of course. But Marco Reus can come in and do a job there. I don't know much about their second goalkeeper, but I can tell you that it doesn't matter, because if we don't take the chances that we potentially might be creating, it doesn't matter who's in goal. Sometimes they don't even need a goalkeeper in goal, because we're not actually scoring the goals. So I think we don't need to necessarily worry about Dortmund too much in terms of who they're going to start, or we just need to make sure that we're compact at the back, that we transition that ball forward. Me personally, I'm going to show you my team. Me personally, I would go with this team. So I would go with Kepa. I'd go Reece James as my right back. Now, obviously, we have no Badiashile, who isn't in the team. There's no David Datro Fofana. There's no Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. There's no, obviously, Andros Santos, who's now on loan anyway. But I would go with the two of Wesley Fofana and Koulibaly as my centre-backs. Now, the reason I've gone for two rather than three, I think it's a massive game for Trevor Chalobah to come back into, and he's probably the most, with Thiago Silva being injured, he'll be the next centre-back I suppose you would see in the team coming into it. But he has always come in, he's always done a job, but he hasn't really played much football over the last, say, 2 or 3 weeks. It's a massive game for him to come back into when we need to try and get some consistency in that back line for me. And I think Fofana, Koulibaly, and I've always said this, I feel like Koulibaly is the person that should be taking the torch off from Silva anyway. You know, Silva should not be playing week in, week out. The injury that he sustained at Spurs was one of those kind of injuries that was just, you know, Harry Kane being an idiot. But in terms of Silva, the age that he is, I mean, he's close to 40 years of age. He should not be playing week in, week out. Yes, he keeps himself regular and keeps himself fit, but at the end of the day, he should not be playing football every single week. Koulibaly should be the one that takes that baton off Silva and says, I'll be the person now, the most experienced centre-back with Badiashile alongside me, with Wesley Fofana alongside me, and Trevor Chalobah. But Koulibaly's always got that mistake in him. When you watch him, his positioning isn't always the best. He sometimes is the wrong side of the defender. He gives away silly free kicks. He gives away, picks up silly yellow cards. He doesn't always look comfortable on the ball. So it is a massive risk playing two centre-backs. But I think without Thiago Silva, for me personally, this is the only option. I think you can't really go with the three centre-backs of Trevor Chalobah, Wesley Fofana and Koulibaly. Not that it would be dangerous, but I just think I would like to see that as an option if we are being hammered. And this is where I go back to Graham Potter tactically. If we're being hammered, we're being outdone, it's not working, or we score 2 goals. If we score 2 goals and Dortmund don't return with a goal and it's 2-1 on aggregate, then you bring on your extra centre-back and close the game out. See that game out with the 5 at the back. Because at the moment, we need goals. There's no point us having 3 centre-backs and sitting back and allowing Dortmund and applying that pressure and inviting the pressure. We have to take the game to Dortmund. We're at home. We're at Stamford Bridge. We have to take the game to them tonight. So for me personally, if we can go 2-0 up, even if we go 2-2, which we'll talk about in a minute in terms of penalties and stuff like that. But if we can get 2 goals and we see that game out and we need to we're in the 80th minute and we're still 2-0, bring on Chalobah. Bring on Chalobah. Maybe you take off Loftus-Cheek. Maybe you take off Kovacic. But take off one of your midfielders and put someone in that role, that centre-back role. Make it a 5 at the back. Tell Chilwell, James, stop going forward. Drop a bit more deeper. Support your centre-backs and just stop everything coming through. Tactically, for me personally, if we're 2-0 up, that's what I would do to see the game out. But I've gone for Koulibaly as my centre-back. I've gone for Ben Chilwell as my left-back as well. Someone that I feel who needs to have that partnership a bit more with Mudryk going forward. I think with Cucurella, we've seen it a couple of times now where there clearly is some sort of disconnect, miscommunication between Mudryk and Cucurella. And I think one of the things that Graham Potter, even after this game, he has to start getting consistency with this team and his starting lineups, and he has to find out his best 11. And at the moment, based on current form, we have to say that Ben Chilwell is clearly the better left back or left wing back than Cucurella. You know, it's not a game I'd want to see Lewis Hall featuring. I've got him currently on the bench for us, but I wouldn't see him start in the game. So I've gone for Ben Chilwell. Now I've gone for 3 in midfield. And I feel like this is the most important part of this lineup. I really do. I think if we go with the 3 in midfield, Ruben Loftus-Cheek, who I've just said, yes, isn't the player that will carry us over the line in terms of Champions League performances and the Premier League. But I think it's either him or Dennis Zakaria who would play. And I think, again, Ruben Loftus-Cheek at times does look comfortable. That's one thing I have said about him. He does look very comfortable on the ball. He's someone that, if he's got the right people alongside him, and maybe Kovacic is that person. He's looked a mess sometimes when he's had Jorginho next to him. But I think Kovacic and Ruben Loftus-Cheek, I think it might have been a Spurs game. There was a game where they both played alongside each other and they played really well. And I think Ruben Loftus-Cheek sometimes just brings some of that calmness. If it depends which Ruben Loftus-Cheek turns up, because if it's a deer in the headlights Ruben Loftus-Cheek who gives the ball away, loses a lot of possession, gives away silly free kicks in that midfield, then we're in for a long night. But I would start with Ruben Loftus-Cheek. I would keep Zakaria on the bench. I would go with Mateo Kovacic, who again, it has to be him, because I think, he's someone that we've missed heavily in that midfield. As I say on here a lot of the time, he's one of the players that loves to get that ball forward, and his first thought is to get the ball forward as opposed to sideways or backwards to a defender. He likes to get the ball forward, and I think, as I said, we have to take this game to Borussia Dortmund. We can't allow them to dictate the game, to dictate tempo, dictate the intensity, and how we're going to play this game tonight. We have to take the game to them. So I think if we can do that, and we have Kovacic, we have Loftus-Cheek playing in those 2 midfield roles there. And then Enzo Fernandez, I'm dying to see Enzo further up the field. I want to see Fernandez up the field. I don't want to see him sitting back, being outdone in midfield. Because to be honest, a lot of other fans from other clubs are saying that he's not the best player. Why have we spent 100 million? We're not seeing the best of him. He's not being played for me personally, in a position that suits him. And I think we've got to see him a bit further up the field, to unlock that final ball into that final third, into João Felix, into Sterling, into Mudryk. We need to see Enzo Fernandez a bit further up the field, allowing him to just do the work that we need him to do, that creativity. We need that. And Loftus-Cheek, I don't think gives you that. I don't think Kovacic will potentially give you that. But I think Fernandez going a bit more forward, supporting the 2 in midfield, but also getting a bit more forward, unlocking that final ball. I think Fernandez can do that tonight. I really do. I want to see him a bit more forward in that, just and a more advanced role, going forward with the ball, taking players on, getting the ball into the box, using João Felix as the player to just feed that final ball into. I want to see that tonight. So I want Fernandez to be a more central person in that team that allows Ruben Loftus-Cheek, Kovacic to sit back slightly, but allow Fernandez just to go forward a little bit more and just to do a bit more of that work with the attacking midfielders who I've gone for on the left and the right side. I've gone with Mudryk on the left, who again, I'm still up in 50-50 with him. We haven't really seen the best of him yet. Again, the cameo at Liverpool was brilliant, but we haven't really seen much of Mudryk since then as well. So I think, as I said, Graham Potter has to use, not just tonight, but the rest of the season, pre-season, get his best 11 and know what his best 11 is. And I think for me, it would be Ben Chilwell currently, based on the form that Cucurella is showing at the moment, or lack of form. And Mudryk has to be the one that goes forward and does that. He has to be the person that goes forward with Ben Chilwell. I want to see overlapping from Chilwell. I want to see them working together on that left side. And the same for James and Sterling. I want to see them working together as a partnership. João Felix, I had to put up front. Now, this is self-explanatory. This has to be self-explanatory. But I've gone for João Felix because I feel like Kai Havertz is not a number 9. Now, João Felix for Atletico has played as a false 9. He looks lively when he plays. He looks very lively when he plays. And I think he's come out yesterday, even in the press conference, and said that, the players don't really need to play under any pressure. He lives and loves these moments in the Champions League. He's got experience playing in the Champions League, these big games where the pressure is actually on. Whether they want to admit it or not, the pressure is on these players to get a result tonight. And I just think Kai Havertz up front doesn't fill me with any joy. It doesn't fill me with any joy. It doesn't fill me with anything that makes me think that potentially we could go on and win the game with Kai Havertz. I can see it now. Sterling plays in a beautiful ball. Kai Havertz skies it over the bar or misplaces the ball. It doesn't fill me with joy. And it's a shame, as I keep saying on here, it's a shame for Havertz. He's not a natural number 9. He should not be playing as a striker. He should be playing either on the left or he should be playing on the right. Maybe me personally, I'll put him on the left. I think that's where he's predominantly, for me, he plays the better football on the left side, similar to where Mudryk is at the moment. But we have to get a result tonight. There's no ifs or buts. That 1-0 win against Leeds was just a little pebble in the ocean. It wasn't even anything. It was just a small little victory that we can't really celebrate based off the back of the other form that we've had as well. So I think for me, we have to go with João Felix up front. We have to have him. There isn't many other options off the bench. So when you look at the bench, you're looking at Kai Havertz. That's it. We don't have David Datro Fofana. We don't have Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang in the team. So we have to go with someone who we know can potentially score the goals. That's João Felix for me. Now, Graham Potter was asked yesterday in his press conference who would start taking the penalties for Chelsea. Who is the designated penalty taker for Chelsea? And luckily I was sitting down when he said this, but he actually said Kai Havertz, which kind of threw me off a little bit because I personally, as much as he doesn't really take them a lot, but the ones that he has taken, Reece James is actually a good penalty taker. Really good penalty taker. Again, I don't know about João Felix. I don't know what his penalty taking conversion rate's like. I don't know if he's a good penalty taker, but Reece James for me would have been a more suited penalty taker. I think I've seen more Reece James penalties than I have Kai Havertz. I might be wrong, but I would have gone with Reece James as my penalty taker, but I'm not the gaffer. I'm not the one that's getting paid £1 million a month. But I would definitely have gone with Reece James. Now, if it is a case that we have to go through to penalties tonight, and apparently the players have been practicing penalties all week, you look at the team that I've put out, even if you look at the bench on the subs bench, it's a worrying sight because who takes the penalties for us? Okay, Kai Havertz maybe comes on. If it's 89 minutes and we're almost going to go into penalties, or we're looking like we're going to go into penalties, Kai Havertz comes on. He's our number 1 penalty taker, apparently. You look at the others, Sterling doesn't fill me with joy. I'm pretty sure even in the Euros or maybe one of the international tournaments, he shied away from a penalty. I feel like it was the Euros with Saka and Rashford and Sancho. Mudryk I've never seen take a penalty. Loftus-Cheek would not fill me with joy. Fernandes, potentially. Chilwell, not really. Koulibaly, not really. Fofana, not really. Kepa, not really. You look at the bench, Mason Mount hasn't really had the best in terms of penalties before as well. Chukwuemeka, Cucurella, Gallagher, Chalobah. I mean, Ziyech, they're not really good penalty. I mean, I'm trying to think of penalty takers and there's not really many in there. So I think if it does come down to penalties, I will be a bag of nerves because I don't know out of that team, honestly, who I would go for as my penalty takers. I really don't. João Felix probably, and maybe Kai Havertz and maybe Reece James are your 3 definites. But then you're looking at Raheem Sterling. It doesn't fill me with joy. So ideally, we need to try and make sure that when we get into this game tonight, we start well. We start on the front foot. We start with a lot of intensity. We start with making sure that we control the game. And the moment we stop doing that and we allow Dortmund to start dictating how the game's going to go, we've already lost. We've already lost the game. It doesn't matter what else happens. If they score first, we've lost the game. We've lost the game. I don't see us even scoring 2 goals. I think the last time we scored 2 goals was probably December 27th, I think. That tells you a lot about how our season's going. We don't score many goals. So not only do we have to win the game and not concede, but we also have to score 2 goals. So asking a lot. Am I confident? 100% I am, because this is the Champions League and this is where we thrive in terms of the chaos that's going on at Chelsea. This is what we normally do. We normally thrive. We normally do well in Europe. And I'm expecting us to do well. And I want everyone who's going to the bridge. I know Theo potentially is going to Stamford Bridge tonight as well. I want everyone who's going to the bridge, make sure that you are vocal for the right reasons. If we lose, we lose. But be vocal for the right reasons. Let's back the team. Let's get behind them. And let's give them something to actually play for. Because as much as we don't think that the pressure and the comments and the booing gets on top of them, of course it does. They're humans. So let's get behind the team tonight. Let's give them something to go out and play for. Not that they need a reason. Getting to the last stage should be everything. They should leave everything out on that pitch tonight. There should be not one player that comes off and thinks, I didn't do enough. Every player should be doing everything to try and win that game tonight. Every single, even Kepa, even the assistant sat next to Graham Potter should leave everything out there tonight, because this is literally the last bit of hope for every Chelsea fan, including me. And I've already given up on the season, but in terms of silverware, this is our last chance. And if we don't win this, then that does have impacts to next season, because we're not going to get the Champions League next season. So that does have a financial impact on how we're going to go about our business in the summer window, regardless of whether people think it will or won't. It will. So we have to try and at least get to the latter state. I want us to try and get as far as possible in this tournament. And I think we have every bit of quality in that team to do so. I'm more confident tonight than I have been over the last 11 defeats. I really am. Even Leeds, I wasn't confident. But tonight, I'm confident. I feel like tonight, a Champions League night, we can go out there. We can either get 2-0, 3-0. But I think we just make sure we don't concede a goal. We can't concede a goal. If we concede first, it's going to be a long night for us. And everyone was all bantering United for the 7-0. If we want to enter one of those sort of games, it's going to be a long week for us. But hopefully we're not. Hopefully we can actually get a good result out of this tonight, and we can walk away with our heads held high. Regardless of the result, I want to see a good performance. And then after that, after this season, I think after this game, I think for the rest of the season, Graham Potter just has to use this time to get to know his squad. He has to get time to get to know his squad. Who's going to be staying in the summer? Who needs to leave? Sort out contracts if they need to be sorted for Ruben and for Mason Mount. But sort out the things that need to be sorted, because now there's no pressure for the team. As long as we don't get relegated at the Premier League, it doesn't matter now. I don't know many managers that come into a job of this profile and are almost given a season off. You know, we can wipe this season away, forget about this season. This is a season where Todd Bowley's basically said to Graham Potter, forget about this season. We're not expecting you to win the league. We're not expecting you to win the Champions League or the FA Cup or the Carabao Cup. We're not expecting any of that. But what we do want is for you to get the best out of these players. And Graham Potter has to do that. He has to do it now. There's no ifs or buts. He's got to get the best out of this squad. He has to. So the best part of this season, pre-season, should be about Graham Potter finding out his best 11, the players that he can trust, the players that he wants to see week in, week out. And if we do miss out on European football, then there's no excuses next season, because we've got one game a week. So that should help with injuries. That should help with Graham Potter being able to rotate his squad as well. A lot of things. So I just think he's got to either, tonight is all about throwing everything at it. And if we lose tonight, then it's about rebuilding and just rebuilding. And I'm happy with that, and I'm all right with that. And if it doesn't work in the summer, then I expect the owners, I expect, a new manager to come in, early on in the season. I really do. So something has to change at the club. Tonight is a massive, massive moment, not just for this season, for next season as well. But I want to let me know your thoughts in the comments as well. Let me know what you think as well. What is the score going to be? What would your predicted lineup be? I'm going to share mine on our social accounts and also Theo's predicted lineup as well on our social accounts before kickoff as well. So make sure you go and check those out. Let us know what you think the score will be as well. Is this time for Mason Mount as well to move on? If he stalls on his contract and he doesn't resume those conversations with the owners in the summer, does it mean that he leaves? Does he go to Liverpool? Which for me personally would be a massive mistake, because wherever he goes, if it's United or Liverpool, I actually think they'll get the best out of him because they'll play him in his best position. But another story for another day. Let me know what you think about that. N'Golo Kante, have we missed the boat with N'Golo Kante now? Is it time for us to cut our losses after this next contract runs out? Can we keep him fit? And also let me know as well what you think about Mason Mount leaving the club. If he leaves, who do we replace him with? Do we need another midfielder in as well? Do we need Lavia? Do we need Caicedo? Do we need Ivan Toney at the club? Let me know as well about Karim Benzema, who is a free transfer this summer by the looks of it. Should we bring him in for a season, and maybe look at bringing someone else in the following season? Let me know all of your comments below. Don't forget to share, subscribe, all of that stuff as well. Hit that link in the description before you leave as well. This has been T.Dot from the Shed End. Thank you very much for watching this live stream. I'll be back later on this week with hopefully with a nice video for you guys if we beat Dortmund. If not, you know what the process is already. Thank you very much for watching, and until next